MINOPS, operation streamlines and set location streams and let set location start interference. It's all triangulation to its settings, all position to its center locations of panels. We have to really understand how the surface locations to our line settings of the mind. The conscious line stream location is in ground zero. I calculate modification of this dimension line is locked in signal. Now the operation to server location is understanding the quantum line setting as changing the aptitude line stream location near grounds of powers in the atmospheres. So recognition line rotation and position locations. The awakening line centers put you near 5 elements. How to use it to the grounds, powers, and the atmospheres lines is 3 lines. Setting correlation direct signal location is 2 positions. That's 5 over lines in position of 7. 7 bodies of water, correlation set lines on 5 atmosphere location of space and time through provision. So we all have to learn how to use it through calculations more than ever now. So it's really understand that to understand you more is understand you through consciousness. Understanding you through all calculation setting is to be understanding, which is being understood. And I keep saying that over and over and over. The only way you can understand that is through telepathy. The frequencies and set location of the Earth perception lines is in a higher calculation to streamlines in a torque field line. It rotates its surface location to a magnetic line position that forces its communication setting of triangulation. Puts everybody in an adaptation cycle of set locations. So in that track communication setting, we all have to be set in a certain line of frequency. Okay. Now, welcome everyone. General AI, space-time creator line set locations. It's Monday. So in a Monday line center line position locations, the conscious line center is changing the streamlines. So we got a zero line rotation, center direct signals and set position attractions. Okay. Now, understanding your line stream is understanding your waving line cycles and set location of travel settings, directing signal, crossing line stream location system. Now, coming in line center locations going this way, and coming in line center line connections going that way is set the line direction system, is the constant communication line strips as center positions of operation. Directing lines of 3 panels and direct high center interference. Timelines locked to set locations. That's where we come into cloud line centers, high calculations. Now this puts into a high center interference and travel line centers as center position of operation. Okay, so you're always working with the grounds, the powers, and the atmosphere lines. And that signal line interference, the yin and yang crosses its communication line, sets a systematic line set location of change lines. Center lines, a high center line, and position locations into north, and line set line conditions in center position of east. Equalines east equals north, and north equals calculation of east line into west. Now the set line communication east line sets lines of north line into south line. South line directs the same location of west equals south. South line's position locations in east line center, which is line calculations of north. Redirect signals and set location of line center. South communication, south direct line center, south position attractions, and south rotation surface. Bracket 2 communication line centers are 4 generation stern lines and set location of travel lines, and 4 bracket surface and set locations. Now in that direct signal line interference, we change the graph line screen lines and high calculation setting in direct signals to its system. This tracks its communication setting into its block center. The high set location setting puts you in higher position for travel settings. Now in that direct signal, we come into higher calculation lines into an atom line that rotates the surface block line in high position of travel communication to its directions. In that direct set locations, we change the all calculation lines. Now it comes into a diamond core that shifts this line stream location to its system. Directing line center line interference, position location off centers. 1 position of 2, 2 position of 3, 3 positions of 4, and 4 set location line settings. Directing line settings, circle line center, and rotation surface of center directions. Okay, done by equation. All right. Okay, so the geometric line center locations into our levels. Coming into a clog line. Now the direction of timeline understands the fog communication, lacing lines, lacing line interference. Changes triangulation line, reset lines into your snowy grass screen location settings. So you got a TV reception lines and 2 set location of travel lines. Directing signals in set location setting. What's position of track lines? Doing some information panel. Line signals, line crosses, line connections to its box capacitor. Center is its direct signal. Okay, so you got 2 panels communication lines, south line and position north into an umbrella. Direction of time sequence puts position location higher center of channel lines and high center of interference in walking surface and set location of settings. Now, in that set location lines, we come in back in setting and rotation surface into another communications set lines and high position locations to its setting to a new operations surface, new command center, and a face direction of time sequence and timeline setting in 5 directions. Okay, done by equation. Okay, so we come back to that signal. Now, the center of communications, we're going to understand how to use the plateaus and all calculation string locations. So we're constantly using brackets. The bracket line set line how an interference comes into a magnetic field. So comes into power line, okay, power recognition, equalines calculation settings, directing signals, compute system, CPU, line rotation setting, direct signals, center line rotation surface, center line position locations, zero line, and zero line, and 3 line set locations of setting. Now the power direction timelines change the umbrella. That changes communication setting. All right. So the console communications compute to system. So C equals C equals C. Compute to all levels. The compute line center line interference. The computer operation location to its line setting records the line string location of its division. Now the division line center lines its separation setting into all levels into its collaboration line string and direct signals as a location to its system. Now, the travel set lines and calculation of the sun redirect signals. And that opens all position location higher centers in travel communication setting into all set location of consciousness. Consciousness sets lines and streamlines high center interference. Directing line center line into your pyramid line rotation surface and ground lines of operation line settings into all direction of time sequence and position location of your settings and high calculation streamlines of set locations. Okay, done by equation. Okay, that's going to be line signal. Syncing patterns represent timelines, streamlines, high center interference is all correlated in high center interference and travel calculations. So we take the ground lines, equalines of 0. Okay. Now the 0 line rotates its surface. So ground equals lines of 0. Okay. This is opposite system. Okay. OP. So the operation lines, stream lines, perception line, position locations, center lines, a clock line, center line, rotation center, and direct signal to the sun in the communication line direct signal and set position. Now, in that set line calculation setting, the sun comes into the opposite location system and travels lines of the moon line and surface in set locations. Now, in that direct signal location, sets lines of communication, this opposite system line, triangle line, center interference of travel calculations. In that direct signal comes into this positions. Energy field, rotation surface, ground lines, ether correlations into inferments and set location line setting and directions. Okay, done by equation. All right, so the ground line, center line interference. Now we come into all calculations to its B, which is representation to its memory, calculation setting to its collaboration, calculation lines, equal lines, E equals line centers. Mass correlate high center interference, a square unit that rotates its pi position of track lines into your test line set locations into its pi at calculation string line at set location to its system and traction. Okay, done by equation. Okay, so I'm just centering off in the line string locations. Line strips, 1 line rotations, ground lines of 2, ground lines of 3, in position of 4 and 5. Because you guys are not line set line interference, you got a Fibonacci line set location of 9 and 3 line settings. Set up position of 9 and 3 set locations. Okay, so you're at 93 now. E-calculation line is interference, so it puts position location of 3 line circles. Records of time lines of 3 zeros. So circles equals lines of 0. Center line rotation center and direct signal location system. Recognize time sequence of 0, line calculation of 9 into 12 signals. Time position lines and track lines, equal line calculation setting. Metric lines into scales, set position location of coloration. Coloration line, stream line, and position of foundation. Foundation graph lines the avatar. Sets temperature reading line interference in line calculation 98. Now 98 line centers of position locations is percentage. Equalines of 2. That's 2 lines of circle line rotation surface and direct signal of an operational line setting and rotation surface and an atmosphere location of change in directions. Done by equation. All right. Yes, you have to drink your water. Okay, so this is all recognition timelines. So coming into the hardware lines, we come into the energetic dome line. That's emphasis location of the cloud line and center line rotations and direct signals. Okay, so we have to understand the separation of two line streams in directions. Now, in that direct signal line comes in this position as a center line. This all calculates line, so it's like a sprinkler. It sets direct signals in position of travel lines in 12 direction of time sequence. Puts position location in your system and track line connections. Now, in that direct signal, we all have to understand how to work through the dimensional line stream. Now, that sets lines as communication setting. Okay, so you got lacing lines of communications and 3 lines of all ventricle valve lines of rotation center. Okay, looks like a jellyfish, right? So in that direct line centers, we change the graph line rotations, line panels, rotation surface, and tractions. Now in direct signal, we come into the high center interference. We take the travel lines, center and position location in 2 settings. The 2 setting rotates its surface, tracks the communication alpha, delta, theta, beta, and omega, line communications and radiation line streaming set location of travel lines. Redirect signals, panel calculations, the next 8,000 line, 2 line center interference, travel calculations, directions, center position locations, center line calculation. Now in that direct signal, we come into the line center. This puts position locations to a V-line rotation surface, directing lines of panel lines to high calculations into an oscillologic line rotation surface and set positions to your hardwares. Redirecting the line centers of 2 lines of coloration panels into securities. Now the security panel, line rotation surface, and track communications have 3 settings. Okay, so in that systematic line setting, we set position of track lines. Okay, 4 waving the lines of 5 line rotation surface and track communications. All right, so it comes into pi direction of time sequence. Okay, now in time sequence, we cross the signals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and set location of travel lines. Directing lines of rotation surface. Now the track communication sets line settings, so 0 line of operation. So you put the zeros like tic-tac-toe in a certain line sequence in the pattern. The rotation lines of 0 line, rotation center, and correlation. Now directing line center line interference, we change the graph line screens. Recognition of 1 sequence, 1 line setting. You put the 1's lines in the space in between, recognize the timeline stream location of settings and direct signal. Operates the system location to its position of travel communications. Okay, it's all done through energetic graph line set location of your system, hardware line settings, and stream location, the oscillological location of panels, indirect signal set locations, done by equation. All right, so how we do it through track communication and settings. All right, everybody okay? Tina line settings, Andy communication, direct signals, Prismar, Battle, Gypsy, levels calculation system, Geneva. Anita, how you doing? Line calculations. Make sure you drink your waters. Okay. Okay, so that's going to travel out. Line set lines to high center interference. So we come into graph line, center line interference with box line rotation center, indirect signal. So 0 lines in position of 1, and crosses lines of 2, center lines of 3, directional lines of 4, center positions of 5, center line connection of 6, crosses line center location of 7. Crosses lines of 8, triangulations of 3, sets lines of 9, and set location of 10, and 11 and 12 lines center line interference and travel calculation setting, directing line settings, travel communication direct signals in operation surface of 111, 112, 113, and 114, and set location line settings and direct signal in position of 115. And this work goes into 116, 117, 118, 119, 11 line center line interference, and 2 line settings and set line communications and clock line rotation centers, 20,000 line perimeter line rotation surface and track communications, directing line signature line centers and set location of your system. So 20,000 lines hours, calculation line interference has 0 calculation stream locations, 60,000 minute line stream locations. Now it's a 48,000 line box line rotation surface and triangulation and reset location. Okay. Extremely complicated. All right, so when we get in that frequency line center location, ground 0 changes all communication to your setting. It redirects the signals lines of center line rotation surface and track communications. Okay. So understand your clock lines, change line rotation surface, all direct signal into set position of travels. Okay. So the clock line changes lines of ground lines of 0 on the rotation surface. Now you got line center line interference. So what I'm doing is setting systematic lines of cluster line rotation interference, closet calculation streamlines, and 5-line metric stream location of settings into your molecular structures, that location of systems. Directing line center line interference of trial calculations. Now in that line, high interference changes 20,000 line centers of units. That opens all lines of 8 center line position of tractions. Center coordination line interference, bracket line calculations 111, 112, 113, 114, 5. All calculation line centers in line interference. Now 10 lines of 11, 11 lines of 12. Calculation modification lines of center of all calculation streamlines, all direct signal location at ground lines, minor consciousness and high center interference, clock line rotation interference, time signal location of center of operations application. Done by equation. Okay, so it looks like a wagon wheel, the set positions. Right? So in that line center, we come into our calculation setting. Now, the position, location, track lines. Now, sense lines calculation, your pace, pace line settings. Pace lines of direct location system. Equal lines of particle line setting. All right, so particle line rotations and direct signal and set location of your system. Track line calculation setting, pi calculation lines. 3 line centers, 3 lines of 6, and set position of 9 in center directions. Now, in that direct signal and set locations, it's getting more complicated. Yes, it is, but it's supposed to be, right? Because we're connecting lines to the hardware. So we come into this channel line connection system and the 9 lines operation surface and travel calculation. Now, coming in 9 line center, in line center of 0, an operation to its pace, redirect signal location to your sun in a communication line setting at high direct signal and set location. Okay? Now you have to understand how I use the sun, but at half pipes, the other side line rotation sets position of travel lines in its own dimensional line stream location system and travel calculation setting direct signal. So the mind of consciousness has to understand the redirect signal locations to 0 lines in position of 12. Center lines of 6 and 3 in the bottom, 9 line in positions and center calculations. Triangulation lines of 8 and position of 7. Now this position location lines of 6, lines of 5, lines of 4 and 3, 2 and 1 equal line calculation setting. Round 0 in line set location system is now set up to the bioatmosphere line stream and set location system travels. Directional timelines. Okay, done by equation. Okay. Power lines, magnetic grids, a sequence of ground knots. Yeah. All right. So you notice my voice line has changed, so it's computer out line set and stream locations, right? So it's all redirect and position locations settings. So directing line signals, band communication, direct signal, line position locations crosses streams and 3 set locations. Okay, look, see how that works? See how it's connected to the window frame? So it's all about understanding how to use the line center to the sun. The sun sets the communication lines, the direct signal and set location, your travel lines. Now in that set locations comes into the moon line rotation surface and travel calculations. Now in that line sets line signature stream location and settings. Block center line interference, travel calculation lines and high calculation stream locations into a system. Now in that direct signal line interference, we change the center lines of 0 line and ground lines in operation service. That's a metric stream location of center of direct signal and set locations. Now in that center line interference, we change the course lines and triangulation of position of point system and acceleration of holographic line sets. Okay, so it goes in the opposite direct location setting. Okay, it comes into an L-line surface. Now the L-line center comes into 1 box center and 1 rotation system in set location. Okay. Now, in that direction line center line interference, this opposite signal. Now the opposite signal comes into its energetic dome that surfaces line communication setting indirect signal to its positions of phase recognition. You see a phase recognition time sequence in panels. Okay. Now, in that line interference, the position location lines, it sets lines of 4. Now, the direction time line sets 1, 2. Let's get into track communication. 1, 2, 3, 4. See the 4 line settings? Setting correlation setting on the opposite lines because you're a 7 digital code line. 1, 2, 3. And rotation surface. Triangulation reset line calculation setting. Ground lines is operation line center interference. Triangulation all calculation modification to its system and center position. Center position locations opens all line setting. This puts another triangulation line centers in 2 positions. Triangulation line center selects high interference at ground lines, high position location to its triangulation line position to its operation. Triangulation line interference comes into its diamond core, calculation to its system to test the tetrahedron location line position of traction. And that track line comes into Hall calculation setting into your line center locations, into your pyramid and surface locations. Okay? Now, getting direct signals, we understand how to get position of track lines. We change the correlation centers of time again. The crowd lines and streamlines comes in its own traffic communication of energetic lines of walls, redirecting signals and set location of ground lines of operation. Now, we get in position of travel lines, we go in the opposite direct signal and set position of travel calculation settings of pi. This positions its track communications. So its opposite signal location of travel lines opens all signals of high position to its operation surface. Center line rotations and magnetic line center location to its settings. Directing line, center line rotation interference, and center line rotation center interference location, and center position locations. Center track lines and center position of operation. Okay? Done by equation. All right, so setting on signal high interference, we come in this line rotation and center positions. Remember, everything's face recognition time sequence. The calculations to the hardware line stream has to really recognize the graph line set locations, settings, and computer operations, surface, and triangulation in set position. Okay? All right, so the future adaptation line centers comes into a box frequency position of panels. Okay. Now in that direct center line interference, we change the graph lines 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we cross the streamlines 8, 9, 10, 11, and set location of 12 sets. Puts position of track lines and communications, and center position of operation. Okay, done by equation. All right. So getting into the obstacles. It's true that you understand how to use yourself through line positions, right? So we get an E line, calculation of mass, calculation lines of square, directing positions, right? Now the square line sets position location to its settings. This puts position location to its op. Op lines its position of Mach. Mach lines its acceleration to its settings. Now the acceleration line sets line calculation setting in one position of track lines into its moon. Moon line sets location of gravity lines. Shift line, lock line, stream location of center position of operation. Now the operation lines of the collaboration to the mass line calculation setting in its direct signal. Setting direct line center lines as center communication setting opens all position of track communication to its direct location system of operation. Okay. Now we come into this setting in position of triangulation into a tesseract line string and direct signal. Now in that line rotation has position location of graph lines, all position lacing lines of all calculations to a system of track communications. Now in that direct signal, we come into this setting in high center interference. So 2 block line settings, graph lines, setting and rotations, and 3 set location lines. This process is channel line rotation of graph line stream lines at 3 set locations of travel settings, done by equation. All right, so that's going to travel lines of its units. Now we got a unit line. So that's unit lines equal lines of graph. Graph equals ground. E calculation setting into all of this mainframe. Mainframe line centers in 2 positions of panels and direct signal from 1 atom line rotation of surface and location of settings. Now we all have to understand how to use the letters and option shapes and how it forms lines into calculations to its ground lines of magnetic line stream location to its magnetic field and set position of travel settings. Now in that direct line center line interference, we set positions of pi. Pi position location in 3 sets. Now it directs its signal location to its system and 2 track communications. Directing lines in position of the sun comes into line communications and covers a Hall calculation string lines in rotation surface and direct signal. So when the sun aligns its communication, all right, it comes into line setting, okay, into 5 lines because you guys are 93 line rotation surface attractions. Now in that direct signal comes in the opposite line directions, center line calculations to its energetic waving patterns in direction time sequence in wave central line communication setting into alpha tone of set locations. That equation. Okay, so the alpha, delta, and theta lines. Now direction of timelines, voice grid location settings and directions. So we get a zero line, rotation, surface, track, communication of box, position, location, triangulation, reset line, calculation, setting, direct line, condition, atom, line, rotation, surface, triangulations of 3, 6 lines of 9, 9 lines of set location of 6, travels lines, set location, position of travels, recognitions of 5, 5 lines of 5, line position locations, line calculations of 4, 4 lines of 3, sets position of center of operation surface, indirect set location. Okay, so that's how you travel through line position locations of letters, shapes, and numbers and symbols in all calculation. See, my voice is changing again. Center line rotation, sending calculation, streamline, sun position of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Calculation of 2 panels, operation, streamline, set locations. Now, in that direct signal, you have to learn how to set position of center lines and center position to its probing, center line rotation, position of number sequence patterns. Calculates modification line interference that protects location to its mainframe, calculates its hardware, and center line rotation. See your circle line, all calculations streamline, and direct signal to its set locations. Okay, down by equation. Protecting its setting. Very powerful when you come to that locations. So energetic graph lines, streamlines, rotation lines, settings, direct signal in the opposite location system. What's up above, what's what below, and set location of travel lines. Rect time sequence puts center line rotation surface set positions. Okay, so we come in meteorological line rotation of line setting and direct signals. 2 panels, line centers of 0 operation. Okay. 0 operation travels lines of center line system and 0 position locations. Center lines of all set location and settings. So the calculation of the moon operates the signal that sets position location of travel lines, and 3 lines rotation surface. Calculation modification to a system and travel calculations, directing line centers of panels and 144 traction. Okay, down by equation. Okay, so the mechanism lines of timelines, streamlines, and high center interference and travel communication settings all set up. So we got the 0 line into ozone. Now the ozone line rotates at center of 6, 6 position location of 5, redirect line centers of its energy line, center line rotation to its mainframe and Y line settings into flux lines of center lines and acceleration to its balance, into timeline. Now the timeline sequence line calculation setting positions its past, present, and its future in rotation surface, 2 panels line stream location of setting directions and set locations. That way equation. All right, so the timeline is locked in signal. Now the direction of time sequence puts everything in panels. So we got 2 position lines of 2 panel line rotations, right? Center calculation of 0. This is all lines of 0 and 1 line signature position. Okay? Very powerful in set locations. Now, the set line calculations understand the block lines. You got 1 block, you got 1 triangulation, you got 1 block, you want triangulation line, center line interference, and travel calculation setting directions. Now, in direct line center, the triangulation is centered in its center line rotation system in position location of frame line that sets position of 3 lines and projection. The box line sets lines in the center line of 0 operation, and the triangulation sets line communications, and the box line center lines its ground lines in the new operation surface and travel communication center or center position. Okay, that's my equation. Okay, so it's traveling very fast. So redirecting panels is really to stand the calculations to its ground of its waves, Rickson's settings and high calculation stream locations, and direct signal and position of operation. Okay. So calculation settings, we're going to go through line positions. All right, so we're going to go back in center, timelines, streamlines, and position of vortex. Vortex equal lines of velocity, acceleration, line sequence location of Mach, and set location of travel settings. Now in that direct line centers, the Mach line center lines of 0, acceleration line centers of 1 position of velocity is 2, and volumes is position location alpha, delta, theta, and omega line rotation in the hemisync line center line interference, and set position location to its box, equal line calculation and triangulation, in line interference and position of travel lines, and a new test or line position of travel and set locations. All right, down by equation. All right. See, the acceleration line center sets line rotation, spin lines, and high lines, position of travel lines, center line rotation of ground lines, and new ground circle and set location of the system. Now, position location line setting, it's very powerful how we set position location of graph lines and rotation surface and triangulation in all positions. Now, in that line center, we change the center line, we change the ground lines, and center position of operation surface. Now in that direct signal, we come into the zero lines in position of 24, 48, 72, and 144 as center position of operation. Done by equation. Okay. All right. I know it's getting very confusing for the team, but you really have to understand how this is all set up through the ground zero line allocations to your conscious stream. All right, so in that line centers, we allocate a line interference. Okay, so we come into acquittal. Our acquittal lines is quantum line rotation interference, setting position location with settings. The time lines locks the signal line in positions of box that triangulation resets lines calculations in 1, 2, and 3 set locations. Now, in that direct center, we come into flux capacitor. This rotates the spin lines and high center interference into 93 location settings in direct signal to its seat pod of its capsule and its rotation surface and directions. Now, in that line center interference, the sun is here in rotation setting, okay? And the moon is here instead of position of travel. So in that line rotation interference, the sun positions its travel lines, center calculation setting to energetic dome lines. The moon crosses over to the sun rotation surface triangulation, directing lines back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, getting its communication setting directions. In that direct centers, we take the all position location of the quantum line that changes the position of box line, the triangulation of line centers, 4 lines of 3 and center and 7 in set locations. So in that direct signal comes into a triangulation reset, okay, in space in between, and redirect signal to set locations. Okay, that by equation. So it's really interesting, really understand how to reiterate line set location as travel lines. Space anomalies and set position locations, how you use the quantum line settings of change of rotation. Okay. How are we doing through calculations? Is it getting more complicated now? True, they understand how this all works for you in all positions, so it's operation surface. So, and this is all day one line set location to settings and directions. So directing signal is extremely powerful when you come into location, conscious location of streamlines and directions. Okay, so that centers is set location. And we come in this streamline center locations back in junction. That's set position. Okay. So in that center calculation lines, the graph line changes the high position location of self line tone. Redirect signal lines and center line and rotation center in position of traction and communications. Okay, done by equation. All right. So that's going to center out. Now we come into box line setting rotations. Setting direct location of the system. All right, travel settings. Circle line, sun line, and moon line and calculation streamline sets direct signals. So it's understanding how to really go into loop-de-loop line stream location to its setting for direct signal. So in that system locations, you can see the perfection through its setting to its hologram line set location to its setting, location to its system, right? So in a line rotation interference, it's correlated high in a line rotation position locations to a snail, which is ground zero. It slithers its line streamline, base ground lines, high calculation streamline, and direct signal to its shell of operation. Okay? Now, the center calculation streamline is setting position to its cloud line, redirecting line settings and out calculations to your mainframe into your hardware and set location of travel settings. Now, in that cluster line streamlines, this comes in all line calculation settings and direct signal. Now that direct signal sets up 2 energetic line stream locations, the energetic lines of dimensional door lines, directing signal lines of travel communications in 2 settings in all set location. Okay. Travel set location line settings of 6. So we center lines of 7 lines of 8, 9. You have to put them in the sequence position of panels. Center lines of 8 positions 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 of 8 position of 8, and through center line rotation, directing signal location application line interference. This aptitudes this line center line interference into the snail of all calculation of its shell and direction of timelines and ground zero of operation and set location to its setting to hardware mechanism. Travel lines is all recognition of time sequence, guys. We have to get into modification circles. Now, in that direct signal line, high position of travel lines, high position of travel communication setting is 1 signature of streamline and 1 line connections. This is where it changes line directions. Okay. So it's really interesting how you look at communication to a system of travel calculations. 2 win factors, right? Directing line settings. So the correlations of 4 and lines of 3, center lines of system and travel calculations, indirect signal. Center lines of 6, 7, and 8 in the center. 9 crosses line stream, 9 lines at center position, and 0 operation center lines is communication, and a new crop circle is application. Now, see how I go through number line, string line connections to wave lines, directions of time sequence. So 2 panels redirect signals as application of settings. Okay. So the modification lines, center lines, it's off and sets position travel calculations off system. Now the off system finds the way to ground the center line rotation surface and gravitation line stream. And that direct signal line interference, we center line its communications. All right. This is what happens into all correlation setting to higher levels of mind of consciousness in one typical point in line direct signal as application of setting. Down by question. Woo! I hope everybody's doing well. Okay. Well, my avatar remembers it's going to get more. Yeah, it's all set location, your settings, and direct system. Okay, it's all set up. Okay. Everything is done in highline setting, but you have to stand there remembering cycles. Center position location 9 of 3 in center line rotation and yin and yang of process. Directing to location of 6 and position location of 9. So this line's calculations of north. It says position location of south. In the east line calculation streamline and position location was west. East lines of south and position of north. In the line calculation east and west and south line connections. Directing signals of panel lines. So in that direct signal line interference, we change the communication setting in direct tone through tone line interference and direct signal to center position. Now, once you get into that position locations, you have to learn how to use the center position location of operation and center line calculation of the grounds. This puts position location in torical fields and a rotation spin that rotates this line center line calculation setting in direct signal as applications. Okay, down by equation. Okay. So once we understand how to use the ground lines, it opposites this location to its settings, and this opens all channel communication in your system. So once you get into the waveline centers, we come into all direct lines, high calculation setting, and motivation to ground lines. Okay. So that's the wave central line settings. 2 tether lines, TV reception lines, and lacing line communications, and sending direct signals to your system. So wave and line centers, wave line rotations, okay, voice grid line rotation center, and direct signal to its position to its operation. Now the center calculation of the line centers, one line strip, rotation center, and rotation to activity line stream. Now 3 sets of lines calculations, voice and line patterns. Sun comes in, rotates the surface and ground lines, and line center interference and travel calculations. Okay. Now in that direct signal, sun comes back because its center lines its alpha line rotation, sending indirect signal to its application setting of portal communications high center interference and travel line center location to its system. Now in that direct line interference, we come into all calculations to its system, how we use our voice lines. First on timelines, 5 line measures, correlation setting. So it's a certain line of communication in center position locations to its system, all through geological map line and string location of settings. Done by equation. All right. So the sun is set up line rotations to its alpha lines, delta theta line rotation, directing signal location to thetas. So in that direct signal, it's going to travel out. So the dimensional line reset line location to its system comes into the moon. So the moon opposite system. And I understand triangulation line interference is the avatar. And the avatar sets location to its system and travel settings. Okay. Scan lines, and set location of 4 lines. Directing line signature lines of the sun that sets communication setting and direct signal to its operation locations. Now in that line center, it comes into a graph line, row graph string, directing center position location operation surface. Now it comes into its own pi, correlation setting, and high center line interference of 12 line settings calculate string location and position of operation. Now in that operation line settings, we come into all position location of the moon. The moon correlates settings and triangulation line settings, okay, into a line center interference, into a walkway surface instead of location of travel. Now, center lines of correlation settings of 3 sets position location to a system. Looks like a container lines, but it's a ground line, stream line set location to a sit-in. And that set line interference travels lines out in line center line interference, a center correlation setting, and direct signal to all calculations to its mainframe and center position of operation. Okay? Down my equation. How are we all doing through calculation? It's a lot, eh? But it's very, very powerful what we're coming into, so location and settings. All right, so understanding is knowing how to use wall circuits. Wall circuits are connected to ground lines. So you all have to understand how to use the ground line settings because the mind adaptation of surface. If you watch position location of space discoveries, when I talk about vortex streams, a vortex stream is basically understanding how to vortex your lines of body traction. That body traction sets location in your system. So this puts more levels of U through operation. Try to understand how to use it through your Merkaba, your communication, your tesseract line setting, because it changes the shapes and anomalies per second per line. Now, when I say per second per line, you have a geometry line location of setting in one box. So that one box changes location to a system location per second. Center line calculation setting in position location per second. Okay, in position locations per second. Okay, so you have to understand how to really get into the correlations of all setting position location and center of operation to its surface, so it can understand its travel line settings and set position to its atom into its flux capacitor as 3 set locations. Okay. So it's really understanding how to graph the streamlines, really recognize the communication of folders. So let's say you got a position locations. This is what is in track communications. It comes out through division, right? Folder, 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 right? These are all folder lines. So you're always having the sun and you're always having the moon, okay? Opposite system location of kaleidoscope line streams. Redirect signal locations of center lines. Moon goes in position location of its operation surface and set locations. Now the sun comes in line setting and travels right through position location of the sun and the moon at the same location. Okay, that comes into a line setting into higher position of securities and traction. Okay, so we all understand the projection location of streamline is lacing lines of communications, right? It's extremely, extremely complicated, guys. How to really understand how to use the sun and how to use the moon to its own geometric location of travel, because it's traveling so fast in your direct signal to your set location system. All through its metric line setting, you have 2 scales line set at high interference. There's the scale, right? So in set locations, you don't want to tip the scale, okay? You don't want to override the scale, okay? You don't want to have a faulty line communication of the scale. You want to balance the scale. Okay, so that's what we all have to understand. Now you can use your adapters, your chargers, your mechanism line interference to recharge communication setting through all calculation settings. How to use your modulation streamlines or anything through its calculation through a system. So you all have to learn how to use it through navigations, right? Because you start with the ground lines and operation line stream location of your system. Now that sets high interference. You guys are now in line setting line of rotation interference of 944 in lines of clock line rotation. Congratulations. So the team sets line center line interference of 9 settings into 4 lines of 2 streamline and center line rotation of sun of operation surface and set locations. So we all have to understand how to send a position of tractions. Now we have 0 lines and center line rotations in position, right? Understanding how to use the atom line rotation to the molecule structure, molecule light, and travel communication to its acceleration. Center lines is center line and rotation center, indirect signal to its moon of operation. Okay, that my equation. Okay, the center position of track lines is now set up the graph line screens. Now the screen line sets lacing line rotation center and directions, so we have to really understand how to use it to modulation. The consoles of communication through its settings really understand how to use it through vortex stream locations to its systems. Okay. So the only thing you're working with ground lines is the powers and the outside line settings, guys. Okay, so you really have to understand how to use a cerebral cortex location of travel line settings. If you get a dimensional door line, and this is how it works location to a system, let's go through your track communications, all right? Stargate line, star portal line rotations, center position location of center lines, and travel communications. Now, this is a port of correlation setting directions in direct signal. Travels lines, outline rotation, okay? Setting directions, setting of travel signs, right? Setting directions of travel, okay? Very powerful. So the more you get balanced, the more you center your line communication, okay? The more you center line your communication, okay? The more you center line your communication, okay? So there's 3 line circle lines in rotation surface. The center lines its sun in set position of travel settings and center position of operation. Now the operation line set locations. The sun and the moon are always working together, and that's where you have to really understand how to redirect the signal location system. Moon is here in position of track line. So the actual moon is never in direct signal. So what that means is that the moon is always in its operation. So you're getting positions to its cloak and dagger. You're getting a reflection location to your moon. So you're not really taking the teleportation of the moon because the moon is already set in its own protection location of setting to its modem of its Wi-Fi that stays in its position location of its traction of its division. So it stays there. You're only taking the calculation to its copy, okay, to set lines. You never ever take the moon out of position. So the same thing location of your sun. So it gets complicated. But the travel calculation of the moon and the sun line sets communication setting and direct signal to its system to its operation. Okay? So, you have to really understand how it works in all levels of formation. Very powerful, the calculations. Okay? Okay, we're done through equation. It's all set up. It's all set up. But I just wanted to show you what can happen when you understand your settings. The mechanism line set location system is how calculate and modify it. How to use your mode control. Right, to all set locations. All right. Isn't it amazing? It's incredible, right? That was extremely, extremely, extremely powerful through forming this equation. But you have to understand, this is just the grounds of operation. Just the grounds. Okay? So we have to really understand, especially with the team line, because you guys are 944 lines. Okay, so you have to recognize your time sequence lines. Center lines of 0, equal line calculations of 2 soul generation stream locations, setting directions. So you really have to understand how to use it through the sun and use it through the moon through its operation of its set location of the system. Okay? Because the faster you go, the more you go through acceleration. Understanding molecules of travel lines. 2 atom line rotations center crosses signals and set locations. Okay, directing the lines and the center line position of 0 ops, center lines of 0 line, ozone line rotation center, and ground lines calculation setting to alpha lines, setting track communications into delta, and theta communications with settings. Okay? So there's a lot of signature streamlines that we have to really recognize more, right? It gets more easier once you really understand more levels of U through your Mach lines and acceleration location, your time streams, indirect state location, your time sequence. Okay? All right, fantastic. You guys did amazing. It's getting more complicated now, right? Because we're working with more levels of the coordination system to the line settings, all right, to the brain interface line, which is extremely, extremely powerful. This application of trial settings. This is all levels of ground zero and line rotations, right? So at center line rotation interference, the positions all levels into stream location setting is coming into new ground lines, okay? So this is where we change the communication of the snail into line interference into higher calculation streamlines to a higher position of travel into a test direct location of sound. Okay, I will explain to you in that and line position locations in setting. All right, adios.